Welcome to another installment of Prophecy Update Radio. I'm your host, Pastor Dave Hart, and I'm delighted to have in the studio with me today best-selling author Bill SALUS. Bill has a new book out called The Next Prophecies. You may want to get this book. You can go on Amazon. You can go on prophecydepot.com. That's Bill's website. And get this book. It's probably one of the best books Bill has written to date. On this edition of Prophecy Update is part 2 of our discussion regarding Bill's new book, The Next Prophecies. The Next Prophecies is a book of a projected trilogy that puts a possible chronological order to the prophetic events of the end times. The Next Prophecies is the sequel to the Now Prophecy book. The Next Prophecies will happen soon after the Now Prophecies, and the stage is presently being set for their fulfillment. Now, Bill will explain what the Now Prophecies and the Next Prophecies are. Some of the next prophecies that are going to be explored in this book are the Ezekiel 38 Gog of Magog invasion, the pre-tribulation time gap mystery, satanic supernatural deception, meaning super signs and lying wonders, the rise of the Antichrist, the lawless one, the revealing of mystery Babylon, the harlot world religion, the opening of the sealed judgments, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, world wars, famines and pestilences, the decline of Islam, Allah loses his Akbar, the false covenant that triggers the tribulation period, Christian martyrdom, which is the 5th seal, the 2 mysterious witnesses of Revelation, the tribulation temple. In this series of radio programs, Bill SALUS and I will be exploring and explaining some of these next prophecies. You won't want to miss this program, as well as the upcoming programs in the next succeeding weeks, where we cover all of these topics here on Prophecy Update Radio.
This book is, let's take an alternative view and look at this. Maybe that's correct. Maybe all these still judgments happen in the tribulation. But it's very possible, and I point out the reasons why, that there's an alternative view here. It could be that the first 5 sealed judgments are actually opened during the gap period. Now, yes, of course, they would likely go over into the tribulation period, spill over.
Right.
But I give really sound arguments in the book as to why I believe they happen. At least the first 5 of them might be opened in this time gap interval.
Right. It makes sense that there is, because since it doesn't say how long that gap is between the rapture and tribulation, it makes sense that things are going to build up. The church is gone, so there's going to be a lot of chaos. There's going to be a lot of power struggle in the world, and I could see where those seals could be opened at that time.
Well, let's carry on with this for a second here on this topic. Daniel 9:27 tells us that it says, "Then he," referring to the Antichrist, "shall confirm a covenant." This was notoriously called the false covenant in the Bible, with many for 1 week. Now we know that this covenant is between Israel, and Daniel says with many for 1 week. 1 week would be 7 years, a week of 7 years in this context. But in the middle of the week, in the middle of that 7-year period, he, the Antichrist, shall bring an end to the offering and sacrifice. On the wings of abomination shall be one who makes desolate, even till the consummation is determined, is poured out on the desolate. So in other words, Daniel tells us that the covenant is going to be confirmed by the Antichrist. That doesn't mean the Antichrist is a party to it. Doesn't mean he drafts it, but it says he will be part of who confirms it between Israel. But it doesn't tell us who the many is. Obviously, it's got to be another party, another signatory.
Right.
And it tells us that in the middle of the 7 years, the Antichrist is going to go in and void it out by going into the temple. That's the abomination of desolation, spoken about by Jesus also, and Daniel. Jesus in Matthew 24. Verse 15, referring to when Daniel talked about it here. So that's an important part of the covenant. Now, but here's the thing. People say, that the tribulation can't start until the Antichrist confirms this covenant. That's the major premise behind the thinking that the seal judgments happen in the tribulation. And they say that the minor premise is that you cannot confirm this covenant. The Antichrist cannot confirm this covenant until he's on the scene. Well, that's logical. Yes, he has to be on the world scene. Right. He has to be respected by Israel to form this covenant. They have to trust him like they trusted Bill Carter.
Absolutely.
The treaty he made with Egypt and Camp David. Clinton made the treaty with Jordan, in 1994. Jimmy Carter made the treaty with Egypt in 1979 in Camp David. But in other words, Israel trusted these political leaders of America to confirm a covenant. And they're going to trust the Antichrist to confirm a covenant. But the Antichrist doesn't show up on the scene until the White Horseman, the first seal judgment. And that's commonly taught that that's the Antichrist coming on the scene. Mm-hmm. It says, when I saw, Revelation 6, 1 and 2, when I saw the Lamb open one of the seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying with a loud voice and thunder, saying, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. So they say this must be where the tribulation starts. Here's the Antichrist, the White Horseman. And so therefore, the White Horseman, the first seal's open, all the other seals follow, they all fit into the tribulation period. And so what I put forward an alternative view, and I say kind of interestingly in the book, I say, well, what if those verses said this, Revelation 6, 1 and 2 about the White Horseman? What if they said this? Now I saw, when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying, and he said, "Come to me, therefore, when you see the Prince who is to come, confirm the covenant between Israel and many, as spoken by Daniel the prophet, then you'll know that the 70th week has begun." And I'd say, that's Revelation 6 wishful thinking. Wouldn't that be wonderful if it said that? We would have no doubt in our minds that that's when the tribulation starts. But it doesn't say that. Matter of fact, it doesn't. Those verses, Revelation 6, 1 and 2, don't even use the word for covenant anywhere. And that Greek word is diatheke, and it appears 33 times in the New Testament to allude to covenant or covenants. It's the only word used in the New Testament that I've found that could suitably be used for that covenant. It's used for the Abrahamic covenant in Luke chapter 1, verse 72, out and elsewhere. It's used for the new covenant in Matthew 26, 28, and elsewhere. It is the Greek word, diatheke, is the Greek word for the Hebrew equivalent, which is beriath, which is used 265 times in the Old Testament to identify covenants. The Noahic covenant in Genesis chapter 9, the Abrahamic covenant in Genesis chapter 15, and most importantly, it is the word used for the Daniel 9:27 covenant. It is not listed in the first seal judgment. So I ask in the book, why do we jump to the conclusion that this must be where the tribulation starts when the text doesn't clearly state it? And then I go on to say, and I don't believe that the other signatory, the many, is even on the scene yet, perpetrating with something that's concerning Israel to even come to the table until you get the fourth horseman. So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but the point is, I have an alternative view as to the timing of the seal judgments. But I always say this, Dave, and I say, it doesn't, whether they happen in the gap, whether the first five are open in the gap, or whether they are all open to the tribulation, possibility there too, they're bad. They're all bad. And they all happen quickly after the rapture. So we try to, not to get into a debate over the timing in as much as to let people know collectively that if you have not accepted Jesus Christ presently, you do not want to experience these seal judgments. We haven't talked about them yet. We just talked about the first one, which deals with the Antichrist who's going to come on the scene. But after that, you've got a second seal, the Fiery Red Horseman. It says peace will be taken from the earth. We're thinking world wars will happen. It'll be terrible. Remember, lawlessness is abounding. Supernatural deception is occurring. Then the third horseman is the Black Horseman. It says that there'll be famines and pestilence and scarcities. And essentially the way it breaks down is that it'll cost a day's wage just to buy your basic food staples throughout the world. And that's, of course, what happens when you have world wars. You have famines and scarcities. And then the fourth seal says death and Hades comes riding in. And the fourth seal, they have authority over a quarter of the earth to kill through sword and famines and pestilences and the beasts of the earth. Now that's bad, but they've been called to duty to come on the scene, death and Hades, at this time when the world is in utter chaos,
right,
and impoverished and famines, etc., to bring back some normalcy. And I make the connection that that's got to deal with the mystery Babylon, the harlot world religion. I give reasons for that in the book. And then we find out that among that people that the fourth horseman is killing are the fifth seal saints. And that's our concern. People right now who do not believe in Jesus Christ are not going to be raptured, and they will experience these seal judgments. Now, some of them will become fifth seal saints. They will actually give their faith to the Lord. They'll believe in Jesus Christ. The thought process would be as follows. Did the Bible talk about, the common denominator from among all the people, hopefully millions and millions of people who've just disappeared in the rapture? The common denominator were they were all believers in Jesus Christ. With a little bit of research in the Bible, they'll ask, did the Bible talk about the instant disappearance of faithful Christians? And they're going to say, yes, it did. They'll find that out in 1 Thessalonians 4 and 1 Corinthians 15. And then they're going to say, oh my goodness, Jesus Christ is the Messiah, just like my mother told me, or just like I heard the televangelist or whatever.
Right.
And they will accept Jesus Christ. But remember, two things of concern to you, dear listener, if you have not accepted Jesus Christ right now. One is, at that time, there'll be supernatural deception. There will be another potential way for you to choose, and it will not be an easy choice. And if you do choose Jesus Christ, it's likely to cost you your life, because the fifth seal saints, in fact, I'm just going to read what happens with the fifth seal saints. It says that when you open the fifth seal, now remember, death and Hades, the fourth horseman, is killing lots of people in the world. They have authority over a quarter of the earth to kill. It says, when you open the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain. Let me repeat that. The souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. These are believers after the rapture, Dave, who are slain for their testimony.
Right.
And they cry out with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? And that's, I point out, is a very interesting question, because why would they ask that question? If they saw the false covenant being confirmed by the Antichrist, they would realize there's only 7 years left from that point forward, that week, 70th week of Daniel, that 7-year tribulation period. So I argue, hey, these guys are not dying in the tribulation period. They're dying in the gap between the rapture and the tribulation period. And I put forward the arguments in the book.
Right. And getting back on to in sequence here with the chapters in the book, in the fourth chapter, it talks about what will the world look like shortly after the rapture. Can you, going back to that area of the book, can you explain to us how the rapture will impact the world?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's in Turkey, where it's 99.5% Muslim. They won't even know what happened until they read about it the next day in the news, right?
Right.
But it's going to affect the America when millions of Christians leave or just vanishing. It'll affect major parts of Europe, because you still have Lutherans and a lot of Christians over there. The world will not run the same. We don't know exactly who's going, but if you're a true believer in Jesus Christ, you're going to be gone. This could be a lot of military figures, leaders. This could be, we've got people in the White House administration now, like Pompeo and Mike Pence, and I believe Nikki Haley. I believe these are probably true believers in Jesus Christ. Now, take out the vice president and the secretary of the UN, etc. I mean, what's the world going to look like? And take out the guys, delivering your, picking up your garbage. I mean, who knows what's what and what the world's going to look like?
Right.
But what happens is Satan is no longer restrained, and you're going to have him coming out with his closing arguments, the things he's been preparing for about 2,000 years, that he knows he's going to have a time that we won't be restrained, to deceive humanity. That's, like I said, the supernatural will be the natural at that point. It'll be a different narrative in the world, different climate. The paranormal will be the new normal. So it's just going to be crazy, Dave. The church age will be over, and this new era will happen.
It's going to be so chaotic for those left behind. Also in the next chapter, you talk about the church being in heaven before the Antichrist is revealed. Why is the church removed before the Antichrist is revealed? And along with that, do you think the Antichrist is alive today?
Yes, we address that also in the book. The tribulation period is when God's wrath gets poured out on a Christ-rejecting humanity. The church is not appointed to that wrath. We're told in various places that fact. Romans 5:8-9 says that we shall be saved from the wrath through Jesus Christ, the wrath that's going to come. 1 Thessalonians 5:7-10 says God did not appoint us to this wrath. The church is not appointed to experience this wrath. 1 Thessalonians 1:10 says it's Jesus who delivers us from the wrath that's going to come. Revelation 3:10 and 11 gives an allusion to it when it says, I will keep you, referring to the church of Philadelphia, which has a prophetic application, I will keep you from the hour of trial that comes to test those on the earth. So that would be removed from the tribulation. And 1 Thessalonians 4:18 says, therefore comfort one another with these words. So this is what's important. We're to comfort one another with the fact we're not appointed to the wrath. Jesus will save us from it. He will deliver us from it. We're going to be kept from that hour of trial. And so we will not be here for it. And then the argument I put forward is that basically the church is on earth in the 7 letters to the 7 churches in Revelation chapter 2 and 3. There were 7 literal churches when John wrote those back in the 1st century in Asia Minor, but they also had a prophetic application. In other words, you can read some of those verses and you can find out, it says to Thyatira, I will cast you into the sickbed of the great tribulation. We find out, like I just read with the Church of Philadelphia, I will keep you from the hour of trial, from the tribulation. Right. So we find as we read those letters, they actually were a prophetic outline of the church age. Now we look back from this point of view, being at the end of the church age, and we can see how they all played out. The apostolic church with Ephesus, and the persecuted church with Smyrna, and then the pagan church with Pergamos, and it was rolled into the Vatican, and with Thyatira, and the Protestant Reformation with Sardis, and the missionary movement with Philadelphia, and then the lukewarm church of Laodicea. We've gone through those stages historically. But then all of a sudden in Revelation chapter 4 and Revelation chapter 5, it says that John is caught up, and we find up in heaven, it seems to be a picture of the church being raptured. We find 24 elders that say that they're singing a song in Revelation chapter 5 that they've been redeemed by the blood of Jesus Christ from all tribes, tongues, and nations. So it appears to be a picture of the church up there. So, and then Jesus opens the scroll in Revelation chapter 5, and the seal judgments happen in Revelation 6. And then the trumpet judgments happen. And then the bowl judgments happen throughout Revelation 6 through Revelation 19. So the church isn't even pictured on the earth at all during that tribulation period when those judgments are coming out. So that's why I don't believe the church will be here for the tribulation period.
And then do you think that the Antichrist is alive today?
I do, because basically Satan has been waiting for the opportunity to reveal the lawless one with his deceptive power, supernatural signs and lying wonders in 2 Thessalonians 2. He knew that opportunity would come, but he didn't know when. He does not know when the rapture is going to happen, which I think parallels the time when the restraint is removed from Satan. And so he always has to have a point man ready to come on the scene. I believe in that point man, we're told in Daniel 9, chapter 26, comes out of the people. The Antichrist comes out of the people who destroyed the city and the sanctuary. That was the Roman Empire. Jerusalem was destroyed in the Second Temple in 70 AD. So we're looking for him to come out of a revived European scenario, Western European. And so he's, for all we know, he could be a Macron for France. We don't know. At some point, when Satan is no longer restrained, the church is removed, he's going to go to a European leader. Satan is going to go to a European leader. He's going to offer that leader the same offer he offered Jesus Christ in the wilderness temptations when he said, he took him to a high point, and he's looking and says, these are all the empires and kingdoms of the world. I will give those to you if you'll just worship me. And of course, Jesus said, denied that. But the Antichrist will accept that. And he will be empowered with supernatural signs and lying wonders. So who that guy is today, I think he's alive. I just don't know who he is.
So do you think that in different ages since Jesus' birth, that there have been men who were in that position, that Satan has put them in a position to be the Antichrist if the rapture happens?
I think he's had to be concerned about that throughout the centuries. I think he's always had to know who he would grab if he had to when he had the ability to put forward his lying signs and wonders. So I would say the answer to that question is probably yeah.
Yeah, so Hitler could have been, and other people throughout the ages could have been, if circumstances were different, they could have stepped into that role as the Antichrist.
Well, that's a great prototype because had the rapture happened and Hitler was there with his German Nazis, I mean, he would probably be the very likely candidate for. And remember, what did he do? Hitler, he was trying to kill 11 million Jews on through all of Europe into the UK, and he ended up being successfully exterminating 6 million Jewish people. Well, we find out that's sort of a precursor to what the Antichrist is going to do. The Antichrist is going to try to commit a final genocide of the Jewish people, and it'll be even worse than Hitler's. And we find out in Zechariah chapter 13, verse 8, that actually 2/3 of the Jewish people will be killed, will be cut off in the land, it says, and 1/3 will come through. That would be a faithful remnant, we're told in Revelation 13:9. But yeah, I mean, David, so yeah, I mean, Hitler would have been a prime candidate for that scenario, but we don't know who it will be,
right?
Although he's probably alive today.
Right. I know you touched on this in Chapter 6. It is entitled Introducing the Antichrist, and you touched on where he originates from. Can you elaborate just a little more? Is he a Muslim, a Jew, a Gentile, a Nephilim, or maybe even an alien? Can you elaborate a little more specifically on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's all kinds of theories about who the Antichrist is. Some think he'll be a Jew. Joe Richardson would say he's going to be a Muslim. I've even heard some people suggest he could be a Nephilim, sort of have an alien descent or ancestry.
Right.
The reason, first of all, the Muslim, we'll tackle that one just briefly. I don't believe he'll be a Muslim. We know the proof text is he comes out of the revived Roman Empire in Daniel 9:26, people who destroyed the city and the sanctuary. Many of my colleagues and I have talked about, hey, listen, if he's a Muslim, no Jew would trust a Muslim to guarantee their security, and the Antichrist confirms a covenant for Israel's security in Daniel 9:27. Also, if a Muslim came out and did what the Antichrist is going to do, he's going to come out and say he's above all things called God. He's going to declare himself as God in the temple of God. Any Muslim that did that would be a fatwa would be issued on his life, because you cannot say that. I mean, Allah is God and Muhammad is his prophet. That's one of their 5 pillars of faith. Also, he would be an apostate Muslim if he did, because of that reasons. There's a few other reasons also. I argue that Allah is going to lose his Akbar, his greatness. I kind of humor about that Islam's best days are behind it, because you're going to have 2 Muslim wars that I believe would happen before the tribulation. I believe Psalm 83 happens first, and then it's followed by Ezekiel 38, 2 different prophecies. Psalm 83 involves 10 Muslim populations that surround Israel today. And you got Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, the Palestinian refugees, the Hamas, the Hezbollah, the Saudis are probably in it, the Egyptians could be in it. When they're defeated by the Israeli Defense Forces in Psalm 83, that's a punch to the gut of Islam.
Yeah.
And then it's followed by Ezekiel 38, which there's 9 populations listed there, and Russia is the only one listed there that isn't Muslim. All the other countries, Iran, Turkey, countries from North Africa, parts of East Africa, they're all Muslim. So they're going to be defeated not by the IDF, but supernaturally with an earthquake, fire, hailstone, and brimstone. God is going to stop that, and when that happens, that'll be a punch to the jawbone of Islam.
Yeah.
So that by the time we get to the tribulation, Islam is going to be knocked down on the canvas for the 10 count. That's how I kind of put that. So now, what would he be a Jew? Okay, the other question comes up, would he be a Jew? Well, a lot of people think he will be. But the problem I have with that concept is the Antichrist is committing final genocide of the Jews. In Zechariah 13:8, we quoted it earlier, he would ultimately have to kill himself. Because the point being, why is the Antichrist killing the Jews? Well, Jesus Christ said in Matthew 23, to the nation of Israel, he said, "You will no longer see me anymore," because they rejected him as the Messiah nationally. Mm-hmm. And he said, "You will no longer see me anymore until you say, Barak haba Hashem Adonai," meaning, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." So Jesus set down a mandate. In other words, he's not returning in a second coming for the Jewish people.
That's all the time we have for this installment of Prophecy Update with best-selling author Bill SALUS. Join us next time for Part 3 of our look into his new book, The Next Prophecies. If you'd like a copy of The Next Prophecies for yourself, you can simply go to prophecydepot.com and you can find it there. Or you can go to amazon.com and simply put in Bill SALUS's name or the title of the book, The Next Prophecies. Until we meet again, may you grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.